Hey everybody, good morning. It's Kathy Klotz-Guest here and welcome to episode 14 of the Yes and Brand Show. I'm excited to have you. Lots of things are happening. It's been a fun, busy, crazy week. Holy moly, lots to talk about today. For those of you who know me, welcome back. So glad you're here. For those of you that don't know me, you're like, who the heck is Kathy Klotz-Guest? Well, I am the author of Stop Boring Me. Woo, 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 woo. Makes good like coaster, party tray for serving after you've read it. I am also the host of the Yes and Brand Show and the Improvised Marketing Show podcast. And I am a mashup of I spent 15 years in high-tech marketing, running high-tech marketing, but I also have 20 years in stand-up comedy and improv comedy. So I am a mashup of those two worlds. And all good people are mashups, I think. And with me today, I'm very excited, is somebody I really enjoy talking to, and I love following him online, offers such smart, wonderful perspective. And that is Alan Berkson. He is the Director of Community Outreach and Analyst Relations at Freshdesk. So thank you, Alan, for being here.
Do I have to start and say yes and?
No, you don't.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm happy to have you. I will say yes and is one of those things that it's very funny because when I work with a lot of very left-brain people, they sometimes get hung up on the wording and yes and. You don't have to use the literal words yes and, you just have to embody the spirit of yes and, which is to build on each other's stuff. And that's really what it's all about. So we're happy to have you. All right. So let's talk about, I'm a mashup. I talked about really briefly what I'm a mashup of. Alan, you're a mashup. You're an interesting mashup. What's your mashup of?
I'm a huge mashup. I have so when I graduated with a degree in computer science and a minor in English. I wanted to be a journalist.
Holy moly.
And when I looked for jobs, I actually had an offer from the New York Times as an entry-level journalist position. And at the same time, I got an offer from Wall Street to do programming. Now, the New York Times offer, and now I'm going to date myself, the New York Times offered me $14,000 a year. Lehman Brothers, yes, I know that Lehman Brothers, offered me $24,000 a year. So could you guess which job I took?
Let me think about that.
But then after about a long career in technology, I now write about technology. So I've come full circle. I am so finally got back to my writing roots, I guess, per se. So
I love that. I don't meet too many people who have the computer science and the English and journalism background. And I love talking to people like you because you really understand technology, but you also understand how to write about it and what it means and from a human perspective. And so I really love that mashup. You're an interesting mashup. I think everybody is.
Well, there are three of us who can do that, Kathy. There are only three people who actually can write and know technology, and we have meetings on Saturdays. No, I'm kidding, but it's actually
you probably do.
It's hard to find that combination of people who can understand what's going on in technology and be able to articulate it in some way that is credible to a lay audience.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I can think of two other people besides yourself on just at the tip of my tongue, and you probably have a secret handshake and all. So we won't ask you for it right now. No, that's fantastic. And welcome to Lynn Abate Johnson, who's out there. She is watching and saying hi, everybody. So hello back. And if you have questions, everybody, thank you for joining us. Go ahead and ask those. I love the fact that you have a background in story. We both appreciate story. And so when I was talking to Alan about what we would talk about, we talked about story structure and storytelling because I think it's such an important thing today. But before we sort of jump into story structure, let's talk about who's doing it well, who's maybe not doing it so well, and we can get into the kind of deep dive in the details. But it's been an interesting week for some brands out there. Who do you think is doing storytelling really well? Then who's not doing it well? And it shouldn't be a shock to anybody.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that there are brands that have done it well and then are failing, like a CocaCola.
Yeah.
They were doing it so well for a long time, and they kind of lost their way. And look, as a brand, it's really tough to tell your story because you don't want to sound like you're bragging. You don't want to necessarily. You have to be careful of. I mean, careful of who you're trying to embrace. You want to be funny, but you can't be too edgy because then you risk being either creepy or insulting. And as we've seen this week.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Although I think humor is one of those things, and we can certainly talk more about that. I think humor is one of those things that is a very poorly understood animal because when done right, and even witty can make a difference, can make a big difference in marketing. It can be so endearing to your audience. And I think sometimes people overthink it. They're afraid of it. Certainly it can backfire when done wrong. I just think that there's more to fear. There's more to fear in thinking of marketing and humor as jokes. And if we think about it the right way, humor can be really expansive, and it can be so many things under the humor umbrella. It's not just jokes. So that's just my nerdy kind of humor improv thing.
so for, improv. You talk about humor. I think of actually in terms of jazz.
Yeah, and that's what improv is. That's what improv is.
And I remember watching Wynton Marsalis. I love talk about how they do jazz and how the musicians are each other, and they're listening as much as they're playing, and they're trying to riff off it. And I think that's the challenge that brands have is you put somebody in social media, they have to improvise, but they may not have the structure, they may not have the context, or they're bringing too much of themselves that may not reflect what the brand wants. And so, how do you give as a brand? How do you give your employees the key? You say we're gonna riff in the key of C, and how to you do your solo now, you do your solo now, but listen to each other. You have to empower your people in social. You have to give them the ability to be, because you want them to take advantage. You want them to be authentic. You've had it. I love it when a brand responds to me on Twitter. I went to a restaurant and I sent a picture and they say, "Hey, that was cool. Did you also try that?" That's a simple one, but when they try to be edgy or funny, that really becomes a challenge. I think we have to give comedy classes for social media for anybody who's managing social on Twitter.
Well, and it's more fundamental than that. And I appreciate that you said jazz, because humor and improv are different. And this is where I get nerdy, because I do stand-up comedy. I also spent 14 years and I continue to perform improv. And without getting too nerdy, because like my grandma says, "That's nice, dear." She just sees them all as one thing. Without getting too nuanced, I think they are different. And I think improv is really about teaching people to react in real time and to yes and whatever the customer's doing in a way that makes sense. And to be able to take the wall down and do what's right for the brand and the customer. And that's really this improvisation and jazz that we're talking about, because it is listening. It's adding on to whatever is being said and being in that moment. And I think we first need to teach people how to improvise and to be solid in listening. And then comedy is a different animal, because comedy is really the object is to try to be funny. And improv really honestly isn't. Improv, the natural humor will come out of listening, because we just yes-anded somebody else's idea. And I think it's a nuanced thing, but it's an important thing, because if we can just get people to listen, like you said, and respond in sort of a jazz-like way, which is, let's make this up together. Let's do this together. The natural human element and the humor will flow out of that, and we don't have to force the funny so hard. We don't have to crowbar in the funny. And I think that's sort of my theory, and why marketing should operate like an improv group, and it should operate like an improv group. Honestly, if we're gonna go there,
I would probably agree that probably the most important element in improv is trust.
Yes,
that you need to have that trust that because you're going to make yourself vulnerable, and you're going to step out on a limb, and you want to trust that whoever you're working with is going to go there with you.
Yeah.
And that's the same in jazz.
Yeah.
And I actually came up with a formula for trust in marketing. I call it PET. So it's proactivity, engagement, and transparency equal trust.
Love it.
So proactivity is listening. Proactivity is basically the story I like to tell is, do you remember back in the 80s, Audi the car Audi had a problem with spontaneous acceleration. You remember?
Yes. Scary. Yeah.
Well, see, and you say it's scary. You know that there's nothing wrong with the car? It was never a problem. It was a sports car, and so it was a performance car, and so the accelerator and the brake were similar sizes, and so it was very easy to go to the wrong one. And so when it first happened, Audi came out and said, "There's nothing wrong with the car. The people just need to know how to drive the car." And it came out on 60 Minutes. It was not a true, but suddenly Audi went from selling 100,000 cars a year in the U.S. to selling like 5,000 cars in the U.S. And that's proactivity, meaning they didn't go out in front of it. They didn't go out and understand that it wasn't, they just said, there's nothing wrong with my car. It should be fine. You have to take that further step and say, maybe I need to do something, maybe to understand more about what the market is. Right.
To blame the customers in effect and say they just need to know how to drive the car. That's sort of a violation of it's a blocking. What we call in improv, we call it a denial of an offer. And so, yeah.
That's great. So the second piece is engagement.
Yeah.
And there was a recent. Well, this goes back a ways. Again, this is another one of my favorite stories. You know, Kevin Smith, the producer, the film producer.
Yes.
So he was flying Southwest Airlines and ended up with the famous tweet, "I'm too fat to fly."
I remember that.
And so engagement is preparing your staff to understand how to take advantage of. You have those moments. Every time you can talk to a customer that's gold. But you want to be able to take advantage of it. And so those flight attendants weren't aware of a few things. One is they probably should have had a little more empathy, but they also weren't aware of the impact that 20 years before that, they have that incident. It happens. It's a story Kevin Smith tells to his friends, over beers in a hot tub. Oh my God, and it's very small. But now in an era where everybody has this big bullhorn, you can create noise. Those flight attendants need to understand they're not operating in a small, that their actions. And so how do you prepare for those actions?
Yeah.
And transparency is about, another old example I use. I was in the IT business and I was a Dell partner, and Dell had a motherboard that had a problem, and they didn't do a recall, and only if you called would they tell you, yeah, it's a problem, and we'll send you a new one. And it took them years to really get to the bottom of it. And the flip side is Intel came out with a motherboard that they had a small problem that maybe affected less than 1% of the people who might use it. And they did a voluntary recall. It cost them $1 billion. So which is the brand you trust? The one that hides their problems and only if you complain a lot, they'll admit to it, or the one who proactively says, you know what, I'm going to be transparent and say, we've got an issue, we're working on it, and here's your solution. So those three pieces: proactivity, engagement, and transparency equals trust. So there's my formula. Okay, we're done, right?
I like that. PET. That's an easy acronym. I love it. PET. That's a really and it's such a powerful thing to do. And trust is so fragile. It's easy to mess up and hard to gain, right? And that's all it takes is one instance where it just burns. It just burns, and then you got to go back and rebuild it. And I think it's really interesting that companies, and this maybe gets back to storytelling, and part of the employees' role in storytelling is that companies still are hesitant to trust their employees. They're very scared, but they also want to have it kind of both ways. They have to recognize that employees not only can, help the company, they can hurt the company. Now, when an employee does something great, they benefit, right? There's equity, there's brand equity in that. But then you also have to teach employees how to make decisions quickly, how to improvise according to brand values with the company. You have to sometimes let them have a little bit of a personal brand. This is a whole new era where companies now have influencers that are employees, but also have their own personal brand, and they have to understand how that works. But they also then have to understand that the employees, part of their job is that they're stewards of the story, and they have to tell their own stories and be trusted to do that. So I think there's this really awkward dance that's happening with employees, and companies just aren't sure necessarily how much rope to give people and how much not to give people. And I think the smart ones are starting to figure it out. So my question to you, Alan, and I have a lot of them, it's like, who do you see as doing a great job with managing that balance today? Because it's tricky.
Well, the best models of the entertainment industry. There is a technique in storytelling called transmedia storytelling. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes. So, I'm a storyteller.
so transmedia, and for those who are not familiar, transmedia is telling a story across multiple platforms, but not telling the same story. In the old days, somebody would write a book, they'd make the same story into a movie, and then they'd make it into a comic book and make the video. It was the same story. That's not transmedia storytelling. That's just translation into a different channel.
Right.
But being able to tell different pieces of a story across different channels, that's transmedia. If you look at Marvel Studios, Marvel is doing billions and billions of dollars. Why are they so successful? Is because they're able to engage their audience with different pieces of their story across a tremendous number of platforms. The same challenge for brands. The challenge was that the marketing mindset is they come up with a campaign. A campaign is not a story.
That's right. Let's say that again, because that's important. A campaign is not a story. Yes.
So somebody says, I want to get attention. And that's what a campaign is. I want attention. But that's not a story. A great story that I could tell about this is, I've done some work with Starlight Runner Entertainment and Jeff Gomez and his company. And years ago, CocaCola came out with a thing called Happiness Factory. It was a commercial where you put a quarter into the machine and then you went behind the scenes and it was like an animated thing. I don't know if you remember. And
I do. Yeah.
And the agency that made that campaign, it was very successful. Coca-Cola went back to them and said, "Can you do some more of this? Can you expand it into a story world?" And it's like, "Oh no, that's it. We're done," because they don't know how to create story worlds. So Starlight Runner went in there and created a story world around it. And the techniques they used were actually there was a thing called liquid storytelling that Coca-Cola came out with. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos. They were really cool. That was all premised based on the work that they did. But it's about finding ways to tell different pieces of the story across different platforms. And for a while, Coca-Cola was doing really well. I think they've lost their way recently, though.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. And this is one of those things where some companies get the storytelling right, but I think I still come back to there's different pieces of the story.
Well, Kathy, who do you think is doing it well?
When it comes to, and this is the big question. It's like, I think there are companies that do a good job. I'd like to hear more from their employees. I think, so I was telling Park Howell about this at Social Media Marketing World. I said, he asked me, who do you love? And I said, I really love Man Crates. Man Crates. Okay, it's B2C, but I think they do a really great job. I think they have done a phenomenal job of telling the story about gifts for men. It's a lot like Dollar Shave Club, consistently across everything. I think Microsoft has gotten better about telling stories.
Microsoft's gotten
really good at telling stories. Now, I still think, and even IBM, I think, has gotten, and GE, markedly better at, in terms of B2B, telling stories. But I will tell you this, the only one of those that I think is doing a really good job of telling stories through the employee lens is really GE. And this is where I think B2B and B2C could do better. I would like to see more focus on employees, not as, just human assets, but storytellers. Like, I want to, set the meta story, obviously, it's marketing's job. But then let's hear from the employees. Ford did, when Scott Monty was there, Ford did such a great job of employee storytelling. I mean, they were one of the best, I think. And I would like to see more of that. Like, honestly, I mean, we all know Pepsi made a big blunder in the last week, huge blunder, like horrible blunder. I mean, I don't know how it got that far. However, I would say this. Why is it that I get you have a mass market, it's Pepsi, but I would love to see Pepsi do something different and actually feature different employees. What does Pepsi mean to me?
Why
I would love to see
what the employee thinks. I'm just curious. What does that bring? What does that bring for you, for the brand?
Well, here's the thing for me is that storytelling to me it's brand storytelling means nothing if we don't think about it inside out. And I've talked about this for many years. I've done talks on this topic, which is inside out storytelling. There is no brand storytelling that is this magic sound wall and that all of a sudden the brand storytelling is great, but the company story and the way it treats employees is crappy. You can't have that division. You can't, it's not sustainable. So I really believe that a company that's holistically healthy and values storytelling and values people, there should be these great stories and happy employees internally. I'd like to know that. I'm also a storytelling person. I'm a storyteller, and it's something that, we both do for a living. And so I probably look at it through a different lens maybe, but also as a customer, I want to know that they're treating their people right. And I would like to know. Plus, I'd like to know because I think with mass market things like Pepsi and Coke, it's always sort of user-generated content. But part of the user, the UGC here, are employees.
Right.
Part of the story is employees. So I kind of want to know, I want to see stories created by and reflected back by customers, no question. But I also want to see employees, happy employee. I want to see that. What's it like?
These are the people who are making the products that I'm consuming or using.
Yes.
Or whatever it is. And who are these people and how is, there's always that, I'm in the customer service business, and there's always that saying that, you treat your employees like you want them to treat your customers, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you hear happy stories from employees talking about, what they get out of their job or what that means, or maybe a broader spectrum of how being involved with their company, being involved with the community, or helps them get other stuff done, that it makes you feel maybe more connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brand,
totally.
Someone you can relate to.
Totally. Like my feelings for Uber were magnified when I heard that horror story. Absolutely. And I think most customers were. I mean, the whole boycott, delete the Uber app from your thing was so successful. And it started because, people felt a sense of outrage about the way employees, especially, female employees, were being treated. So it matters today. It absolutely matters. And I think that, you can't have this wall. And think about it. I mean, have I had some good experiences with Uber? Actually, I have. Have I had some poor experiences with Uber? I actually have. And it matters because, if all this chaos is going in internally, you're going to see it eventually spill out to the way that Uber treats us.
There's a term it's called, I call it glass houses.
Yes.
and it's how you FUD in sales, fear, uncertainty, doubt, that's how you sell. My version of FUD is full unwanted disclosure.
Yeah.
And the fact that as a brand, you're living in a glass house. Yeah. And that, anything that your employees do, anything that happens in the organization, it's going to get out.
Yeah,
totally. You're naive if you don't think it is. So how do you inoculate yourself? Because something's going to happen. There's no perfect brand. There's an employee's going to do something well. So what's one of your favorite brands? Who's a brand you trust and love? Give me an example.
I think so. One company that I've always admired because they didn't veer off the path like North Face did is Patagonia. I think Patagonia does an amazingly consistent job about environmental storytelling, and I think that they, to me, set a standard in a lot of ways of what I think good storytelling could be.
So, all right. So now let's say that a viral video comes out of a Patagonia employee abusing a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could happen, right? It could happen to any brand.
So, but you've developed this trust in the brand, and so you say there's dissonance there. You say to yourself, you know what? That's not like Patagonia. That must be a rogue employee. That's not indicative of the brand. Flip side is you hear that an employee at Uber was just accused of sexual harassment.
Right.
You'll say, yeah, that makes sense.
Not that it was a wide sweeping thing.
No, but I'm just saying as an example.
No. I understand what you. Right.
By building a strong brand and putting that authentic, you inoculate yourself against. So you're giving the brand the benefit of the doubt in this situation with Patagonia, as opposed to
Right. So let me back up a little bit because I get what you're saying, but I want to clarify. I want to clarify something. I don't believe there is such a thing as inoculation because at any point in time, if Patagonia were to do something terrible, I might give them the benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't mean that the benefit of the doubt becomes just is something that will never change. It just means that I'm willing to hear them out on it. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely.
That's the same as your friends. If you have you have a trust bank with your friends.
Of course.
And the friends you've had for 30 years, and if they do something that's out of character, you're like, are you okay?
Absolutely. No, totally. But there is no permanent
inoculation. By inoculation. No, it's not a permanent inoculation. But it gives some immunity maybe to a certain level of.
Sure.
The benefit of the doubt, the trust.
Yes. I agree. I totally agree. I think we're more likely to hear out a brand if they've been consistent and done these things and taken the right action. We're more likely to hear them out. There's no doubt about that. But it also reminds me that in this world of just everything changing and all it takes is one rogue employee, nobody's immune. And so the best defenses, I think we're both in agreement, the best defenses are you've got to start to have these honest stories and really take the wall down. And I think for me, employee storytelling is one of the last walls to come down for a lot of companies, because I think everybody accepts that a lot of times, storytelling to the customer is very much cosmetic. And we want to see what's really going on. Because you're right, those stories aren't going to stay internal. They're eventually, if they're there, they're going to leak out.
Right. So if you work in the entertainment business, if you're working on a story world, there's a Bible. There's a thing that gives you the sense of everything that's happening. For Lucasfilms, who is in charge of all the continuity for all the stories. Mm-hmm. Take a story with Luke and Leia and Chewbacca, and it takes place. Yeah. He'll say, no, that he's got. And there's a Bible, but companies don't do that.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be an ongoing issue for companies in terms of your employees will talk.
Yeah.
People will talk. Your customers will talk. How do you tell your story? Because in the old days, it was broadcast. You were the only one telling your story, and maybe people talked to each other, but they weren't able to do it on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how do you give them the tools they need? How do you give them that's with a bunch of logos and
well, it goes to your point of trust, and you can train people, and this is where training comes in. And we talk a lot about sort of in the early days of blogging, it was, well, we have to train people how to blog. There are parameters about what you can blog about, totally. And I think about how far employee blogging has come, especially for companies like IBM, who are on the vanguard of letting a lot of their employees do it, right? I think we've come kind of far. We still need to have the structure in place about what's the overarching company story and brand story, but it requires a lot of trust. And that's where I think it's just one of those things that some companies have it. Things will go wrong sometimes. And that's part of, I think, this bold new world of storytelling is that things are going to sometimes go wrong when you trust people, because human beings and executives too will screw up. So there's no way to completely eradicate that risk, but I think you minimize it, and you can kind of maybe reduce it by training and having the right people, and also recognizing that if you have enough of the right people who are great storytellers telling stories, you're going to sort of diversify that story portfolio. Because the best storytellers I've ever met, and I'd be curious what you think, Alan, in my experience, sometimes they're in the C-suite, but most often they're not. The best storytellers in a company are not in the C-suite. And so I think it's really recognizing that story stewardship is really every employee's responsibility in some way. And companies are still kind of scared. And we see that with live streaming, and we see that with social media. And there's still this control. I think brands still want to control a story. So I don't know. What's your thought on that?
No, the first case about who's the storyteller within the company, storytelling is not part of anybody's job title.
That's true.
Even in marketing, it's rarely part of anybody's job title. So it's not something you hire for.
No.
it's a skill that people have, or it's a passion that people have. And so how do you tap, and yet you're even in the C-suite.
Yeah.
But it's from the C-suite that the messaging, and I say that with quotes because messaging is not a story world that you believe in, but it's not. What is your company? Who are you? What do you have to give?
Yes.
I said to you, what is Patagonia world? You have a really good feeling about what that is, because it's imbued in not in the messaging they use, but how when you go into the store, how the types of products that they use to market, and the types of products that they don't choose to bring to market because they do it. So
no question.
That's all part of the story world. Lots of companies have brand dissonance when it comes to, even like I said, the products is a perfect example. Sometimes you're like, why did they do that? What does that have to do with their story? And that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, and you see this because, you're a journalist too, and in your training, I think sometimes, companies, especially tech, have had to shift from this product story mentality of product features to a story-based mentality. And for some companies, it's been easier than others. And some companies really struggle because even with product managers, I mean, they're so deeply trained to talk about the brand, the benefits and the features. And they're not trained to think at a higher level of, what's the story of my customer and how am I serving their day and making it better? And that's something that I think is a different kind of training. It's a different kind of mindset. It just tells you, I think, that marketing has to evolve. And I think that the capabilities of marketing has had to evolve to be more storytelling-like.
Well, I think the silos of most organizations take you further away from the customer.
Yes.
And having that customer understanding how the customer uses it. Do you know Dan Genghis?
I do, actually. We sat next to each other at a book signing at Social Media Marketing World.
you have to read. It's great. But Dan has a knack for
I think you froze up on me, Alan. We froze up.
Can you hear me?
I can't. I think you froze just for a brief second there, yeah.
Should I just stand very still so you think I'm frozen?
That would be funny. Oh my gosh, that'd be like art. You're unfrozen now, so that would be hilarious. Like, people tuning in would be like, "What's wrong with my computer?" Oh my God, Alan! Oh my God, you're a man after my own heart. By the way, that's great.
All right, you made me laugh. This is good. You should be a comedian.
I should think about that.
But Dan has a knack, and so when a company does something, I'm not doing justice to the story, and you have to read the book. But
will do.
Basically, making sure that there was a garbage pail that was shaped the right way so that they can empty the tray easily into it in a restaurant. That's like it's a little thing that nobody will really notice. But if it doesn't work, you do notice. But when it does work, it's seamless, but it adds to the experience. And that's having a customer point of view, because you know how your customer is using your product. It goes back to the Audi story. If you don't understand how your customer is using your product or the experience they're having, and as you move down the chain, customer service people know exactly how your customer's using the product, because they're going to yell and complain.
True.
But the product manager, the product engineer, the planners, the strategists, you have to keep going back to the front. At Fresh Desk, we have a philosophy. Everybody has to do support at some point. Wow,
that's great though. That's great training. Oh my gosh.
We call it all hands on support. So I did it, and you particularly for our engineers, when somebody comes in and says, "I'm having trouble doing this," and the engineer knew they did it for a certain way to make something happen, and that's not how the customers are experiencing it. That's an aha moment, right? Mm-hmm. That's, okay, I didn't realize that that's what's happening. So I think that, and this may help throughout an organization in terms of social as well, getting people closer to the customers and break barriers. because you try to do that. You try to, you put people and say, I don't want you to talk to customers. I just need you to write code, or I need you to for engineering or design or whatever.
No.
But you can't do that. You need that customer point of view.
I love that you guys do that. I think that's so smart. Let's talk about, because
our CEO does that. Don't be surprised that our CEO might pick up the phone and talk to you on a customer service call.
I love that.
Or Twitter, yeah.
I think that's how it should be. So there was a company years ago, I'll just say, I started in marketing right out of college and in high tech. And so I worked for a very large company that no longer exists. But at one time it was a high flying Wall Street darling in the Silicon Valley. And the CEO would often just show up and, crash tables in the cafeteria. What's going on? What's percolating? What's happening? And he'd sit in on calls. He'd come to your office and sit in on calls and say, what's going on? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And he was so accessible, and it was really phenomenal because it made a difference. I think he actually was one of those CEOs that he didn't sit in his office. He was out there talking to everybody and I want to know, went on sales calls. He'd sit there in the meeting. People wouldn't know he was there. We'd have the Polycom on, and he wouldn't, with customer calls, and he'd just sit there in the background and people, the customer wouldn't know he was there. He wouldn't announce himself. But it was one of those things that I think, you really got a sense of that's how it should be. That's how a company should be. I mean, how else are you going to know? I think we don't often get the bottoms-up storytelling. And we talk in brand storytelling a lot about top-down, the brand. Here's the brand story, everybody. Now go out and do the brand story. But I think we forget that the brand story is also a bottoms-up. What are the customer people hearing? What are the product engineers hearing? They're talking to people every day. What is the reality about, here's our story, here's what the customers are saying. Now let's work with our people bottoms-up to bridge that gap. Let's bridge that gap. And I don't see a lot of companies thinking about it that way.
There's an old story in the IT business, and I'm sure there's an analog for marketing or whatever, where it's a cartoon.
Uh-oh, you froze again. You could be messing with me.
No. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, so there's an old story in the IT business where there's a cartoon where there's different panels where here's what the user asked for, here's how the analyst read it, here's how the designer created it, and it ends up it's designing a swing, and it's like playing a game of telephone. By the time it gets to the end result, it has nothing to do with what the user originally required, and so there's that gap. And getting closer to the customer, I think, helps that. But you mentioned something that made me think about storytelling. There's internal storytelling as well.
Yeah.
In terms of how, and it's part about what you talked about, that communication. I think I was listening to Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, talking about when she first started. The first thing she did was she skipped over all her middle management, went right down to her frontline employees and said, "Tell me what's going on. What's working? What's not?
Yeah.
And how can I help you do your job better? And tell me what you need," because that also gets lost. And that whatever internal strife you have in your organization, it's a glass house. It's not going to get out. It's just like if you have a bad relationship, your kids know it.
They do indeed. They do.
And so, it's the same thing with your customer. If you have internal strife in your organization, your customers know it.
Oh, they know.
Somehow.
They know. You're absolutely right. No, you're right. And that's why I think employee storytelling is part of, I think, building a good repertoire, a diverse portfolio, if you will, of storytelling. But let's talk about social structure and storytelling structure, because I know you have some other thoughts about story structure. And I'm curious your thoughts, because you've seen a lot of things. You've seen a whole evolution of technology, and you've also seen, the companies out there that are telling great stories and how they're telling great stories. So what are your thoughts about, in social media today, what are some story structures that work? Where can a company start to think about this kind of stuff? I know it's like boiling the ocean, so I'm going to ask you to boil the ocean, Alan.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was saying about how entertainment companies tell stories.
Yeah. And
that it's not just, stories have heroes, stories have, because look, take it back. There's a book, and I can't remember it, Heroes and Outlaws, I think it was. Are you familiar with the book?
I've heard the title. I haven't read it.
And it helps you create a brand structure around around your brand. in a typical story, and we talk about the hero's journey, that if your brand is, if your customer's the hero, the customer be the hero in the story, how are you helping them meet their aspirations? And I think that's an interesting structure. So it gets beyond, what does Nike doesn't sell you sneakers.
Yeah.
Nike sells you a lifestyle. They sell you an outcome. They sell you an aspiration, right? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously an outlier, but any brand can look at how do I fit into my customer's life, and how do I help them tell their story? Because if they're wearing my clothes, if they're eating my food, it's part of who they are. And I think that's a piece that gets lost. So it's not about, if I'm buying a computer, it's not about how fast the memory is or how big the screen is. It's, am I able to do what I need to do with it? And what does that get for me? And I think that's a piece of the storytelling that getting away from the features and benefits. That's like old school marketing. Yeah,
it is. It's something I believe, and I've written about it. I know you have as well. And it's this idea of how are you making your customers' lives better? And that's really the heart of your story. If you can't answer that, I think it's time to go back to the story and kind of refine it. I also think that...
Before you even get into that, because you made me think of something that just happened to me, and I just posted it on Facebook too.
Okay, sure.
And this goes to how employees tell stories.
Oh, yes.
And I get an email from a solicitation email that says, I want to. And I stopped reading. Honestly, I don't care what you want, right?
Right.
Do I care what that salesperson wants?
Yeah.
No, but so that person should say, hey, I bet you want to be able to do this. Let's talk about that because I think I can help you. Now you've got my attention.
Yeah.
And so too many employees are making themselves the hero of the story as opposed to the customer the hero of the story.
And that is a perfect segue. It's my joke this morning that I think marketers should not be allowed in heaven because I swear to God, there'll be ads everywhere. They'll just ruin the place. But that's a really important point is, it's interesting because I'm a fan of the hero's journey. I know you're a fan of the hero's journey. Those of us who do storytelling for a living are fans of the hero's journey. But I think the hero's journey is only one part of the story. And people who kind of go overkill on the hero's journey, they forget that there has to be a we. And that if it's the brand is the hero, those brands don't make the storytelling journey over the chasm to go to the we. And how many tech companies, I mean, I've been in Silicon Valley, most of my career. How many tech brands have failed to create the we because they became they basically elevated the founder to this cult-like status, hero status. And they forgot all about the customers and the employees and the we. So I think this over celebration of the hero's journey sometimes is totally misaligned. It's completely.
So you just served me up a softball, Kathy.
You know what I mean?
I'll tell you what softball you took up. With my friend Jeff Gomez for Starlight Runner, he's come up with a post hero's journey model for stories.
Yes.
Yeah. We call it the collective journey. So it's funny that hero's journey has its place, but when you're in a pervasive communications where everybody can be a piece of the story, how do you change that? And we call it if you go to blog.collectivejourney.com, you can see our story.
I've written about it many times, so I'm already on board. I mean, I've been saying this for years. The hero's journey is only one part of it. I'm with you. Yeah. I love that it's a softball. I love that we're agreeing about it. I think there's too many voices in, I think, not just technology marketing, in any type of marketing. I think there's too much, when we talk about the brand, there's still too much brand as hero. And sometimes you should be the hero of your story. The founding story, it's okay to be the hero once in a while. So it's not a bad thing. I just see too many brands today getting advice that's very diluted and watered down, which is, very much wanting to look at us, look what I can do, look what I can do. It's very much they become the.
It's like that 4-year-old or the 3-year-old that says, I'm the center of the universe and it's all about me.
It's crazy, and to me, I think there needs to be a shift in marketing in general, which is, and I love that you're saying that. And I'm so in agreement. The hero's journey is a valid, beautiful part of the whole story. It is not the whole story. So, if anything, I hope people that watch this and sort of go to the website you mentioned and read anything you and I write about, I hope they'll take away that it has its place and it's a very important place, but the hero has to be your customer more often than it should be you. And I just can't emphasize that enough, because I think there's so much brand storytelling has become sadly a buzzword, which hurts my heart. And a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing out there, and the stuff that I'm seeing out there, getting back to your comment, and I totally agree, which is a campaign is not a story. Good Lord. I'm seeing so much out there that it's so diluted that I think there's a lot of bad storytelling going on.
So if we can bring this back full circle, I was talking about jazz.
Yes.
If you imagine a conductor in an orchestra, and that's what storytelling was 50 years ago, was a soloist or a songwriter sitting up there with the guitar and singing. Today, it's conducting the orchestra, and you are a conductor. You have a little bit of so you bring in some of the users, and you bring in some of your employees, and you have your vendors, and you have your partners, and you have your adjacent products, and they're all telling a piece of the story, and you have to find a way to bring those pieces together. I call that conducting the orchestra in terms of what a brand needs to do to tell their story.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's true. And I love that you're never gonna get disagreement with me on a jazz analogy, because I love jazz. Jazz is awesome. Two, it's such a musical metaphor for what improv really is. Improv is about being able to real time adjust and say yes and to a customer or to an employee, and to go a different direction and to have that kind of agility. Improv
I have a question.
All those things. It's all those things.
I got a bunch of people from Fresh Desk watching.
Hey, Fresh Desk people!
Can you give them an improv tip for my social media engagers? What's a good improv tip for them? What would you for somebody? Because that's, I think, a key.
It is.
It can't be scripted. It's social media that can't be scripted. It's a real-time engagement.
It is a real-time engagement. So, so it depends on what context. You mean as they're listening and engaging in social media online, or
exactly. If you look, there's Oreo broke made it terrible because they created this unbelievably amazing real-time engagement moment, right?
Yeah.
And so, which everybody's looking to try to repeat, and that's hard.
It's hard to do.
What would be a step that someone can take? Because it is about being, improv, like anything else, is about preparation and opportunity. It's not, the Oreo wasn't lucky. They were prepared, and there was an opportunity, and they took advantage of it. I think improv is you're trained, you have the skills to do it, and then you have, when the opportunity rises, when you get that yes and, you can take that action. So what would be some advice you'd give for some of my social media engagers?
So here's your free tip. So improv really is about listening and adding on an empathy. And anything can be a gift. So in improv, any offer is a gift. It's how you choose to see it. So I'll give you an example. So my kid is a raging Lego fanatic. Loves Lego probably more than me, which that makes sense. He's 8. So I posted some of his pictures about all the Lego creations. Lego jumped in, the Twitter account, started sharing the images and saying, oh, we'd love to have Evan design something with us. And we went back and forth, and people were jumping in and sharing what their kids created. And then eventually, I said, oh my gosh, well, my son would just love to do something with you guys. And they said, well, we'd love to have him design something with us, but officially we can't hire him for another 10 years. So tell him to keep innovating. We'll publish some of his designs. And then in 10 years, come see us. But we love hearing it. And it was such a real opportunity, because I really hadn't expected that they would jump in and be listening, and they were jumping in, they were listening. They recognized that they've got a base of fans and future fans out there, and consumers in training. You know, an 8-year-old today is going to have purchasing power tomorrow, and I thought it was such a beautiful way to yes and the moment.
They had a place to share his content.
And well, they actually have a way for them to design. I don't know if you know this. Lego has a way to, they are working on actually being able to share these things, but they actually have, you can design something, send it to Lego. Lego will build the bricks and actually integrate it into a story. They actually now have this integrated storytelling thing where you actually get to upload your designs and it can be part of this interactive online storytelling thing. So I think Lego's very smart. They're very creative. They listen well. So what I would encourage you to do is anything can be a gift. Even if it's somebody maybe making, hopefully not a negative comment about, your brand. If you jump in and you offer help and see what we can do, or tell us about, whatever, you can actually have a dialogue that other people will jump in on. And I think it's just really about listening, just really listening. And the smallest things can actually kind of blow up and be big things. So the first thing, honestly, is that there's no small offer. There's no small offer.
No small offer.
There's no small offer.
And it's about validating your participation in the brand story.
Totally.
So they validated your son's participation. He went out there and said, "I want to create," and they said, "Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
You're part of it. That's great."
And it makes sense for the brand because Lego's all about play at all ages. Their logo and their sort of brand kind of thing is fun at all ages and play at all ages. And so they recognize that they have fans that are 100 and fans that are 2 years old. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. So if you guys are out there listening, and any brand can do it, it takes some discipline. Anytime somebody mentions you, maybe in the smallest way, get curious. Be curious.
I think what you said, sometimes you may think of it as obvious, but you said no offer is too small.
No.
The fact that you call it an offer, when someone is engaging with you, that's an offer.
It's an offer.
That's basically saying, "Come play with me," like a little kid. As an adult, we lose that sense. A little kid, two kids in the playground. Hey, you want to play? Sure, you want to play? Let's go play. As adults, we're like, I don't know. Do you look too right? Or maybe you'll reject me if I talk to you. Maybe you won't like me. Am I dressed okay? And we get caught up. And sometimes it's just recognizing. But I like that term. I think I have to use that. It's
an improv term. You're welcome. Gee, if only there was a book that described all this stuff. Oh my goodness, there is. Gee, Kathy, you should write a book. Oh wait, I did. I know I'm silly. I'm being silly, but it is. It's an improv term. We call it making an offer because it's exactly what it is. Somebody is saying, "Here's an offer. What are you going to do with it?" And I'll be honest with you. I've tagged brands before. I've been talking about things before, and very few brands, honestly, Alan, very few brands ever jump in and go, Kathy is talking about this. This is interesting. She's sort of typifies or embodies sort of our typical user. Maybe we could engage here. Very few brands have done that. And Lego has done it in a way that blew my mind. But that's why they're Lego. So no offer is too small. And that's really, I think, such an important thing in life too. So be playful. Be playful. Well, there's so many things I could talk about with you because you're so interesting. You have so much great stuff to say. But we'll have to have you back at another time. I would love it. And I'm so glad you came. I know you flew into San Francisco just so you could be on the same coast as me. That's what I
wanted to have the call, and I wanted to do it in the same time zone because somehow that makes it better.
It always makes things better. Even if it doesn't, it just saying that makes it better. Exactly. Alan, what are you working on that you want to tell people about? And also, secondly, where can people connect with you? I would love it if people could connect with you further. So,
the best place to connect with me, I'll start with that, is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Berkson0, BERKSON0.
Oh, we got
One things. One thing is the collective journey I told you about. I'd love if people could check out. It's blog.collectivejourney.com. It's an exploration of of what storytelling is like in a digital age, because it's and just as examples, Stranger Things, Walking Dead. These are all not hero's journey stories. We've gone beyond hero's journey. So we have an explanation, as well as what's going on in politics right now, which I will not discuss, but just to say that that's relevant in terms of collective journey as well. So please check that out.
It really is. I'm so glad you shared that. I'm going to go check that out. I love it. And I think it's so true. We're past the hero's journey. The hero's journey is but one part of the whole story. And it is a beautiful part of the story, but it's not the whole enchilada. So it's time that we kind of talk about it in holistic terms.
And of course, I have to do my shameless plug as well. Please check out Fresh Desk.
Fresh Desk.
We are customer engagement software. We help you do your customer service. We'll help you do your sales, et cetera. So check out freshdesk.com.
But also, too, they believe in story. And I think that's one of the things that's important here. We
believe in customer engagement and listening, and that it goes beyond just, selling them a product.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so I'm looking forward to seeing some Fresh Desk listening and what they might do and how they might engage. I'm going to be looking for that. So no pressure.
I might have to ship a case of the books to our team. So.
Well, you can do better. You can always have me come and talk to your team. There you go. But improv is really, I love that we're talking about this, because you had me at jazz, and I did not set up Alan to even give that analogy, but it's so true. And the more that we can play and be improvisational, the more fun we'll have. So again, everybody, I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest. I'm also the founder of keepingithuman.com. You can go to keepingithuman.com and check out all the goodies. If you go to the storytelling, keepingithuman.com/storytelling, you'll find a bunch of goodies there, all kinds of models and things for storytelling. And the book is Stop Boring Me. And I hope you'll pick up a copy and enjoy it. All right, everybody. Alan, thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks for having me. This was great. You too.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.